Okay, this could be bumpy. I'm taking my glasses off for this one. I posted on one of the social sites that I was going to do a discussion about this series of books, and the comments went crazy. Um, it's an interesting series of books, and the reason I wanted to talk about it, we'll get to that just in a second, is because there's been a lot of book reviews I put up lately where somebody comes in and goes, "Oh, it's misogynistic, it's racist, it's whatever." And there's been some people kind of digging to look for excuses to call books non-politically correct by today's standards. Okay. And I'm not trying to say, oh, we have to look through an eye of whenever the book was written to see if it's still good or bad. There's a lot of books I just wouldn't read today because of the way they were written and the time they reflect, because I just don't enjoy it. But then there's other books I look at and go, well, you really have to dig to kind of want to see something wrong with some of these stories before you can say, oh, that's racist or that's misogynistic or whatever. And then there's this one, the Gore series by John Norman, who was actually a professor of and wrote under an assumed name. So it was John Norman's not his real name. And I won't go into all that detail. But what I will say is that the one of the more interesting things about this series of books is the cover art by a guy named Boris Vallejo, great artist, had a long career in the fantasy world. But the challenge with the art is also the fact that the stories reflect possibly the most misogynistic set of stories I've ever seen. They're not terribly well written. They're okay fantasy. They're okay, even for the time they came out, which was in the 60s. But one of the things about them that I find they should be part of the modern day fiction discussion is if you want to find a series of books with something in it that you can complain about, this is it. Okay, this is the one that you look at and go, holy crap, that was written in the 60s. It's basically thinly veiled BDSM fiction. It's essentially worse than 50 Shades of Grey because the women involved don't get to give consent, right? Every woman in the whole series essentially is either a slave or they're essentially just to be quiet and have babies and that's it, right? And when I say slave, I don't mean slave as in go do work, although that does happen. I mean slave as in that version of slave. Um, so it to me, if you really want to find a series of books to go off and just kind of bitch and complain about, and really want to say, hey, fiction does have things that we should probably try to remember certain books. We should probably try to enjoy certain books, and we should probably learn from certain types of books. Yeah, I remember seeing these on my dad's shelf as a kid. That's my one of my dad's. I think that's one of my dad's copies. May have been a replacement he bought over the years. I don't know, but they came out of my dad's house when he passed away. Um, when I was a teenager, I remember asking him if I could read them, and dad was it was the first time in my life my dad ever said no. So anything else he had in the house, I was allowed to read. I could pick it up. I could take it. The idea was if you picked a book up of dad's shelf, you're supposed to ask him so that he knew where all his books were and he got them back. Never did he actually say no to something other than this one. And I said, why? I was like 13 or 14. He goes, because I don't want you making sex slaves out of women. And that's essentially what this book does, is it says basically women are good for nothing but slaves and sex. So while it might be reasonably written fiction, and I would even argue that I don't necessarily even think it's even all that well written. I have read probably three or four of them trying to figure out what the hell's the big deal. Does this get better? And I read quickly, so I kind of plowed through three or four of them. But I don't really see any redeeming qualities of this one. They're not well written. They're not something that you say there's some socially redeeming quality to it, unless you remember the BDSM community. And then, hey, enjoy yourselves. Just remember there are laws. And so what you see in these books does not comply. But you know, so if you want to have those discussions about where is all fantasy is got misogyny, it's got racism, is whatever. Some of them do, some of them don't. This one, it is everywhere. So I have read a couple of them. I'm sure there's people out there that have read more, and I'm sure as soon as I post this, there'll be five people telling me I'm wrong. But this one, I keep it around because it was my dad's copy, but if it weren't for that, I probably wouldn't. And I never get rid of any book anywhere. So anyway, Everybody take that for what it's worth. Click like, subscribe, follow, comment. If you think I'm wrong, tell me. I'll be happy to have the discussion politely, and love to hear your thoughts on this series. There were, I think, 2 movies that came out of this, both of which are horribly bad also. So, don't bother. But everybody have a great day.